They say you don't really know someone until you've lived with them. Well, I've lived with Harold for 70 years, and tonight, at 94 years old, sitting in the same house where we raised our children, I'm finally ready to tell the truth. The truth about what a real marriage looks like. Not the fairy tale, not the Instagram version, the raw, unfiltered reality that nobody talks about, because maybe they're afraid of what people will think. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm too old for that. My name is Eleanor, and this is the story they don't tell you when you say, I do. People always ask me the same question, at parties, at church, at the grocery store. Eleanor, what's your secret? 70 years with the same man? And I smile. I nod. I say something about patience and love. But that's not the whole truth. The truth? There were mornings I woke up and looked at the man sleeping beside me and felt absolutely nothing. The truth? I packed my bags 4 times. 4 times in 70 years, I had 1 foot out the door. The truth? Harold and I went 11 months without saying, I love you, to each other. 11 months of cold silence in a house that should have been filled with warmth. But here's what else is true. I'm still here. He's still here. And somehow, that silence turned back into laughter. Those packed bags got unpacked. And that man sleeping beside me? He became my favorite person in the world all over again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. I was 24 when I met Harold. It was 1955, and I was working as a secretary at Morrison and Company. He came in wearing a grey suit that was slightly too big for him, nervous as a cat, applying for a job in accounting. He dropped his papers twice. Twice! I helped him pick them up, and when our hands touched, he turned the colour of a summer tomato. 3 months later, he proposed under the oak tree in Central Park. We had known each other for 90 days, but that's how things were done back then. You met someone decent, someone with a job and prospects, and you got married. Love was something you built, not something you waited to feel. Our wedding was simple. My dress cost $12. My mother made the cake. We honeymooned at his aunt's cottage upstate for 3 days because that's all the time he could take off work. And I remember thinking as I watched him sleep that first night as his wife, is this it? Is this what forever looks like? He snored. His feet were cold. He'd forgotten to pack his toothbrush and had to use mine. I had no idea what I was in for. The first 5 years were beautiful. We were broke, but we were happy. We lived in a tiny apartment where you could touch all 4 walls if you stood in the middle. Harold worked 60-hour weeks. I worked too, until I got pregnant with our first child, Margaret. That's when things started to shift. Suddenly, I was home alone with a screaming baby and a husband who came home exhausted, wanting silence and dinner. He'd sit in his chair reading the paper while I juggled a colicky infant and a pot boiling over on the stove. I resented him. God forgive me, but I did. I remember one night, Margaret was maybe 6 months old. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch in weeks. Harold came home late again. Dinner was cold. The baby was crying. And he had the audacity to sigh. Just a sigh. But it was the sigh that broke me. I put the baby in her crib, walked into the bedroom, and started throwing his clothes into a suitcase. "What are you doing?" he asked. "You can leave," I said. "Or I can leave, but I can't do this anymore." He just stood there, this man I'd promised forever to, and we stared at each other across a room that suddenly felt like a canyon. He didn't leave. I didn't leave. Instead, he sat down on the floor, just sat right down on the bedroom floor, and he started to cry. I'd never seen him cry before. Never. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. "I don't know how to be a husband. I don't know how to be a father. I'm terrified I'm failing at both." And just like that, my anger melted, because I realized he was just as lost as I was. We were two kids playing house, and neither of us had read the instruction manual. That night we made a promise. We'd stop pretending we had it all figured out. We'd stop keeping score. We'd stop expecting the other person to be perfect. Did things get easier? No. We had 3 more children. There were job losses and sick parents and financial stress. There were arguments that lasted days. There were times when the only thing keeping us together was the promise we'd made and the fear of what people would say if we broke it. But we kept going. The worst year was 1982. I was 51. Harold was 53. Our youngest had just left for college, and suddenly the house was empty. Just the 2 of us, and we had nothing to say to each other. 27 years of marriage, and we'd become strangers who shared a mortgage. We'd spent so long being parents, being providers, being busy, that we'd forgotten how to be Harold and Eleanor. I started taking long walks in the evening just to avoid sitting in silence with him. He started working late, I suspect, for the same reason. Then, one Tuesday, I remember it was a Tuesday because that was grocery shopping day, I found out that Harold had been having lunch with a woman from his office, twice a week for months. Someone told me, someone who thought I should know. I confronted him that night. Was he having an affair? He looked shocked, genuinely shocked. "No," he said. "No, Eleanor, never." "Then why?" I asked. "Why are you having secret lunches with another woman?" And you know what he said? He said, "Because she listens to me. Because when I talk, she acts like what I'm saying matters. Because I don't feel invisible when I'm with her." That hurt worse than infidelity would have. Because he was right. When had I last really listened to him? When had I last asked about his day and actually cared about the answer? When had either of us truly seen each other? I could have left him then. I had grounds. Everyone would have understood. But something stopped me. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the memory of that young man who dropped his papers twice and turned red when I smiled at him. I asked him a question that changed everything. "Do you want to save this? Do you actually want to be married to me?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "I don't know who I'd be without you, even when I'm angry with you, Even when we're not speaking, you're the first person I think of in the morning. So yes, God help me. Yes, we started over. At 51 and 53 years old, we started dating again. Wednesday nights became our night. No TV, no distractions, just dinner and conversation. We took turns asking each other questions. What do you dream about? What scares you? If you could change one thing about your life, what would it be? We rediscovered each other. Not the young people we'd been, but the people we'd become. The last 30 years have been the best of my life, not because they've been easy. We've buried friends, faced health scares, and weathered the death of 2 of our children. Yes, 2. Life doesn't stop being hard just because you're old. But Harold has been my anchor through it all. When I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 71, he was the one who held my hand through every chemotherapy session. He shaved his head when my hair fell out so I wouldn't be alone in it. He learned to cook because I was too weak to stand at the stove. When his mind started slipping, early dementia, the doctor said, I became his memory. I reminded him of our story every day, who we were, what we'd built, why we mattered. These days his memory comes and goes. Some mornings, he wakes up and knows exactly who I am. Other mornings, he calls me by his mother's name. But even on those confused mornings, he reaches for my hand. Something deep inside him remembers that I'm safe, that I'm home. People think a good marriage is one without conflict, without pain, without doubt. But that's not real. A good marriage is one where you fight through the conflict, where you sit with the pain, where you choose each other again and again, even when choosing each other is the hardest thing you've ever done. 70 years hasn't been one long honeymoon. It's been seasons. Winters where we could barely stand each other. Springs where everything felt new again. Summers of warmth and contentment. Autumns of letting go. But we weathered every season together. So what's the truth about my 70-year marriage? The truth is that it's been the hardest, most frustrating, most exhausting thing I've ever done. And it's also been the greatest privilege of my life. The truth is that marriage isn't about finding the perfect person. It's about becoming the right partner. It's about choosing love when love isn't a feeling, but a decision. The truth is that Harold isn't perfect, and God knows I'm not either. But we've been perfectly imperfect together. Tomorrow, we'll celebrate our 70th anniversary. Harold might not remember what anniversary it is. He might not remember the oak tree, or the $12 dress, or the apartment where you could touch all 4 walls. But I'll remember for both of us. And I'll tell him the story, our story, the one about 2 terrified kids who promised forever and somehow, against all odds, made it come true. If you're in a marriage that's struggling, if you're wondering if it's worth fighting for, I can't tell you what to do. But I can tell you this, the view from 70 years is worth the climb. The love on the other side of the hardest seasons is the deepest you'll ever know. And if I had to do it all over again, the fights, the doubt, the cold silences, the packed bags, I'd choose him every single time. This is Eleanor at 94 telling you the truth, and the truth is, love is worth it. Thank you for listening to my story. If you'd like to hear more quiet stories like this, please subscribe. Until the next story, take care.